Causes of unemployment. Causes of unemployment is the part of the syllabus of O-levels, and in AS level these days, unemployment is not the part of syllabus. However, again in A2, unemployment is again discussed in a bit detail. However, in O-levels, the causes of unemployment are discussed only on surface, right? I meant to say not in that much detail. So I'm going to start the causes of unemployment, the explanation of the causes of unemployment. And initially this part is related to O and A levels, A2 levels both. Usually, first of all, we discuss seasonal unemployment. Seasonal unemployment is related to variations in seasons of the year. We already know that there are some industries which are seasonal. They remain on in some seasons and off in others. So if an industry is closing down temporarily during off season, that industry would lay off its workers temporarily or permanently. As a result, those workers would become unemployed. For example, in extreme winters, in mountainous areas, many of the resorts, many of the hotels, many of the restaurants shut down, and because of their shutting down temporarily due to off season, those workers would be made redundant. So seasonal unemployment is related to seasonal industries which remain off in some seasons and remain on in others. So when they're off, the employment will exist, but when they're off, the industry will shut down and the workers would become unemployed. On the second number, we usually discuss frictional unemployment. Frictional unemployment is also referred as temporal or surge unemployment. It is called temporal unemployment because workers here again are temporarily unemployed. This means that whenever someone leaves a job voluntarily, or it is being dismissed, or it has been made redundant out of a job, then for some period of time in searching for another job, it will face a temporary phase of unemployment that is called frictional unemployment. Obviously, when someone leaves a job and wants to join a new, it will have to remain unemployed for some period of time in many cases because it won't be able to find another job immediately, and therefore will have to pass a phase of unemployment temporarily in switching from one job to another job. The reason of frictional unemployment for lasting is the occupational immobility, geographical immobility, and imperfect knowledge. Occupational immobility means, for example, a worker is looking for a specific job, but the jobs are available in some different industry or of some different nature. As a result, the worker would have to wait for a job which suits to him. Geographical immobility is also a reason. It means that where the job is, the worker cannot reach there either due to distance or due to transportation cost or due to permit of work or due to visa related issues. And then comes imperfect knowledge. When we don't know where the job is, then it takes time for us to reach there, to know about there, and in that period we remain unemployed. So temporal or frictional or surge unemployment is a temporary phase of unemployment which a worker faces in switching from one job to another, and it lasts for long due to occupational immobility, geographical immobility, and imperfect knowledge. Third one is a structural unemployment. A structural unemployment is the unemployment of workers in a specific industry. When some specific industry declines, it has to lay off workers. As a result, those workers become redundant because the industry is declining and therefore they are being laid off. A structural employment occurs due to changes in demand patterns. Some product was demanded earlier, but nowadays there is no demand for it, then obviously industry will shut down and the workers would become redundant. For example, typewriters these days are not being used. As a result, those industries which used to produce typewriters have gone out of business, and as a result they have laid off their workers. Right? So the unemployment due to a decline in industry is referred as structural employment. There can be other reasons of structural employment as well. First of all, as I earlier said, that if the product has become obsolete, the industry would decline. If some industry is losing its comparative cost advantage in production, it will lose its exports markets and as a result would decline and the workers would be made redundant. Due to some government policy, some government restrictions, the specific industry may decline and the workers of that specific industry may become redundant. For example, if let's suppose government imposes a ban on cigarette consumption, the cigarette industry would decline and as a result, the workers in cigarette industry will be out of job. Right? So there can be many reasons of industrial decline. Sometimes a structure of the industry is changing. For example, the primary sector industries are shrinking and being transformed into secondary sector, or the industries in the secondary sector are declining and the tertiary sector is growing, so the workers who are occupationally immobile cannot switch to the new industry, therefore they can become unemployed. So one simple thing has to be noticed here, that whenever unemployment is due to a decline in a specific industry, that is a structural unemployment. Then comes cyclical unemployment. Cyclical unemployment, also known as demand deficient unemployment. From the term demand deficient unemployment, we can simply understand that what is the reason. Sometimes due to some financial crisis or some other crisis, aggregate demand in an economy falls drastically, and due to a fall in demand throughout the industries of all goods and services, firms have to cut back on their output, and when they're cutting on their output, they have to cut on the number of workers. So cyclical unemployment is actually mass unemployment. For example, in 2007 in USA, due to subprime mortgage crisis, the banking sector collapsed. And due to the collapse of the banking sector, USA faced a big financial crisis, because of which aggregate demand level declined drastically, and as a result, large number of workers became unemployed. Right? So this should be noticed, that cyclical unemployment or demand deficient unemployment is unemployment which is occurring throughout the economy. It is actually mass unemployment which is happening in all the industries due to a fall in total demand for goods and services, which means that almost demand for every good and service is falling, and when demand is falling, the firms have to cut back on their output. When they have to cut back on their output, they don't need workers, and when they don't need workers, they make them redundant, and that leads to cyclical unemployment. However, the concept of cyclical unemployment is a disputed one. Classical economists and monetarists do not accept cyclical unemployment. Mainly, classical economists do not accept the concept of cyclical unemployment. However, Keynes, John Maynard Keynes, emphasized that there is a concept, cyclical unemployment, demand deficient unemployment, and it definitely exists, which the classical economist does not accept. The reason behind: classical economists believe that equilibrium level of national output can only exist at full employment level. Equilibrium level of national output would always exist at full employment level. If for the time being, if for a short period of time, if temporarily equilibrium level of output falls below full employment output, this would only be temporary and the things would automatically correct itself and economy would soon restore to its full employment level. That's why demand deficient unemployment is not possible. I'm repeating this point. Classical economists believe that equilibrium level of national output is only stable at full employment level, and for some reasons, for example, a fall in demand, a fall in aggregate demand, if equilibrium level of output would fall below potential output or below full employment level output, this would be only temporary, because due to a recessionary gap created, I'm adding a diagram here, please see that when the equilibrium level of output is falling below full employment level, a recessionary gap would develop. That recessionary gap is indicating that some unemployment has taken place. But classical economists believe that this recessionary gap would automatically close and there is no need of government intervention, and this gap would automatically soon close itself and no long-term mass unemployment is possible. Why they believe so? Because when equilibrium level of output would fall below potential output, it will create a recessionary gap. Due to that recessionary gap, due to that unemployment, trade unions would become weak, workers would become weak, their bargaining power would go down. As a result, wages will start to fall, and when wages would start to fall, cost of production of firms will fall, and due to a fall in cost of production, short-run aggregate supply curve would shift downward or rightward, as a result creating equilibrium level of output again at full employment level. As a result, no long-term or lasting unemployment is possible. Right? I'm repeating this point again. Let's suppose equilibrium level of output was initially at full employment level, then aggregate demand fell, and due to that fall in aggregate demand, a recessionary gap was built in. When the recessionary gap occurred, trade unions become weak, the sellers of other factors of production would become weak, their bargaining power would decline, and as a result prices and wages will go down, cost of production would fall, short-run aggregate supply curve as a result would increase, and equilibrium level will soon be restored at full employment level at lower price level. However, Keynes criticized this thing, and mind it, because of the same reason, cyclical unemployment or demand deficient unemployment is also referred as Keynesian unemployment, because Keynes believed that classicals were not correct. He pointed out that if equilibrium level of output would fall below full employment level output, that would create a recessionary gap, but that recessionary gap would not create a downward pressure on wages, because wages are decided by collective bargaining, by the negotiation between trade union and the firm, and when a wage claim has been settled between the firm and the workers, then the firm cannot lower the wage rates. That's why the wage rates are not downward flexible. Secondly, he explained that markets are not perfect. They are usually imperfect. There are usually monopolies and oligopolies, because of which prices also would not be flexible downward. So when prices and wages are not flexible downward, it means that no downward pressure on cost of production would exist there. As a result, short-run aggregate supply curve would not shift rightward, restoring the economy at full employment level. To understand the Keynesian point of view, look at the following diagram. The diagram is showing the market for labor. Initially, the equilibrium wage rate is W and the quantity employed is Q in the diagram. You would be noticing that the supply curve shown in the diagram is initially horizontal at the current wage rate. Then it is upward sloping beyond the equilibrium. The supply curve has been drawn in this way to show that if the demand for workers would fall, only the quantity demanded of the workers would change. The wage rate would not go downward. Look at the diagram again. Initially, the wage rate is W and the quantity is Q. But later on, the demand for workers is falling and demand curve is shifting backward. But because of the fall in demand curve, because of the fall in demand and a shift in the demand curve backward, only the quantity demanded of labor, or the total quantity of the workers employed, is falling, but the wage rate is still the same. The point is that Keynes is emphasizing that at the wage rate W, the wage rate cannot go down further, because the wages are inflexible. They have been set by the mutual consent of the trade union and the firm, trade union and the industry, and when the one wage rate has been set, the firm cannot reduce the wage rate. And when the wage rate is not falling, then cost of production is not falling, and as a result, in the market of goods and services, because of a fall in cost of production, supply of goods and services would not increase, short-run aggregate supply curve would not shift rightward, and the equilibrium level of national income would not restore to full employment level. This recessionary gap, which was initially created by a fall in aggregate demand, would remain there, would remain intact there, and it would not automatically close. So the demand deficient unemployment or cyclical unemployment is possible according to Keynes. Right? I hope you understand the point. But one thing is for sure, that in the Great Depression, in the start of 20th century, mass unemployment occurred. The point is, if the Keynesian explanation of the mass unemployment during Great Depression is wrong, then what is the real reason of that mass unemployment which was there, which existed there for many years, and that unemployment could not automatically be corrected? That recessionary gap did not close automatically, and as a result, many of the governments in different countries had to intervene in the market, and had to correct the things themselves. So if the Great Depression existed, if the unemployment there existed, if the mass unemployment existed, then what was the reason of that? If you're not accepting the Keynesian explanation, then what is the actual reason? To this question, monetarists answered and put forward the theory of disequilibrium unemployment. They believed that trade unions and government sometimes intervene in the market and set the market wage rate above the equilibrium. I mean to say that trade unions and government intervention sometimes push the wages above the equilibrium wage rate, and when the wage rate goes above the equilibrium, demand for workers contract, supply of worker extends. As a result, an excess supply of workers is created, and that is leading to unemployment. We can understand this point again with the help of a diagram. I'm drawing a simple diagram of aggregate demand and aggregate supply, right? I meant to say demand and supply of labor, and you can see the equilibrium wage rate there. But if the trade unions and the government will push the wages up above the equilibrium, then automatically you can see there that there is an excess supply of labor from A to B, and that is showing unemployment. So the monetarist point of view was that the unemployment in Great Depression was not cyclical unemployment, it was actually disequilibrium unemployment, which was caused by too much government intervention, by too much trade union power in the labor market, and caused unemployment. And they again do not, you know that monetarists are the descendants of the classical economists with little differences, but on this point there is still they still have the same opinion like classicals, and they say that cyclical unemployment again, demand deficient unemployment again is not possible. That unemployment lasted for long and did not automatically solved because the government and the trade unions caused it, and they named it disequilibrium unemployment. So mind it that cyclical unemployment is a disputed concept. Classical economists and monetarist economists do not accept it, while Keynes believed that cyclical unemployment or demand deficient unemployment is possible, and according to him it was happening in Great Depression. But monetarists put forward the theory of disequilibrium unemployment, rejecting the Keynesian idea, and they believe that that unemployment is being caused by government intervention and the intervention of trade union. I hope the point is clear to you. Now, apart from these, I want to discuss a few terms related to unemployment. For example, natural unemployment. Natural unemployment is that rate of unemployment which never becomes zero. That's why it is called natural unemployment, because economists believe that seasonal unemployment, frictional employment, and structural unemployment can never be zero. Some part of the people would definitely remain unemployed. There is residual unemployment as well, which is leftover of workers which are partly handicapped or were initially voluntary unemployed, but now they are involuntary unemployed because they have become work shy or their skills have been eroded. So these people, some part of these people would definitely remain unemployed, and that is referred as natural unemployment or equilibrium unemployment. Right? I'm repeating it. Natural unemployment or equilibrium unemployment is that unemployment which will exist always. It can never become zero because seasonal, frictional, structural, and residual unemployment would never be zero. Some people would always remain unemployed, which means that they would become unemployed for some reason and for some reason they would remain unemployed for a period of time. So natural unemployment is that unemployment which can never be zero, right? So natural unemployment or equilibrium unemployment are the same terms. And if I explain this in the language of Phillips curve, then the natural unemployment rate is that unemployment rate that if the unemployment is tried to be reduced below this rate, it will only result in inflation. Unemployment rate would not actually fall. If the government will try to reduce unemployment rate below the natural rate of unemployment, that would result in inflation and unemployment would not be reduced in long term. There can be a short run trade-off between inflation and unemployment, but in the long run, unemployment would restore back to its equilibrium, only inflation would increase. That is natural unemployment or equilibrium unemployment. I hope this explanation would be feasible for you. I hope you understand the points. I hope that you would like the video and will surely share it, and you'll definitely subscribe my channel for more videos about different topics in economics. Thank you very much and wait for the upcoming videos. Keep in touch, please. Thank you very much.